13 shocking biblical archaeological discoveries scientists never wanted you to know about. Hello, and welcome to the Ancient History channel. You know, history always has a way of surprising us. Sometimes, a small piece of land, a few words carved into stone, or an object that once seemed insignificant can reveal an entire story stretching back thousands of years. And in the world of biblical archaeology, every new discovery not only helps us understand the past more deeply, but also raises questions that continue to challenge scientists as they search for answers. Over the past year, the field of biblical archaeology has witnessed a series of remarkable discoveries, especially those connected to two of the most famous kings in the history of ancient Israel, King David and King Solomon. Some discoveries are small artifacts that hold enormous historical significance, while others are ancient structures that have been uncovered after remaining buried for thousands of years. There are also new studies that are allowing us to look at familiar biblical stories from a completely different perspective. So, what secrets have been uncovered? What ancient traces are capturing the attention of archaeologists around the world? Join us as we explore the 13 most remarkable biblical archaeological discoveries, where every artifact and every ancient structure, it is telling a piece of the story of the ancient world. You may be surprised to learn that beneath the layers of dust and the passage of time, countless mysteries are still waiting to be awakened. So, are you ready? If you are, then let's begin our journey of discovery right now. The 5,500-year-old stone gate at Tel Arani is rewriting the history of ancient urban civilization. Could it be possible that a simple water pipeline installation project accidentally uncovered a structure that could change everything we thought we knew about the birth of the first cities in human history? It may sound unbelievable, but that is exactly what happened at Tel Arani in southern Israel. And what shocked archaeologists even more was the age of this discovery, approximately 5,500 years old, making it far older than what scientists had previously determined. The story began in August 2023, when the Israel Antiquities Authority (IAA) officially announced the discovery of a stone city gate at the Tel Arani archaeological site in Israel. The structure dates back to the early Bronze Age IB period, around 5,500 years ago. This discovery was immediately recognized as the oldest stone city gate ever found in Israel, surpassing the previous record held by Tel Arad. What makes this discovery even more fascinating is that the excavation was not originally planned as an archaeological project. It all began when Mekarot, Israel's national water company, was preparing to install a new water pipeline. During the initial survey of the area, traces of this ancient structure unexpectedly appeared beneath the ground. After realizing the exceptional importance of the discovery, Mekarot agreed to relocate the entire pipeline route to another location in order to preserve the ancient remains. And you know what? What gradually emerged beneath the layers of soil left experts absolutely amazed. The ancient gate was remarkably preserved, standing about 5 feet tall, with a wide passageway constructed from stone combined with massive mud brick blocks leading directly into the ancient city. On both sides stood two enormous watchtowers, creating a highly fortified defensive system. But the discoveries did not stop there. Archaeologists also uncovered a section of city wall measuring between 23 and 26 feet wide, along with many valuable artifacts, including an intact alabaster vessel, small pottery jars, and red-painted bowls. Each artifact helped reconstruct the daily life of the people who lived more than 5 millennia ago. According to Emily Bischoff, the excavation director, this was the first time that a large-scale early Bronze Age gate had been fully uncovered. She explained that constructing such a massive structure required transporting stones from distant locations, producing large quantities of mud bricks, and organizing a significant workforce to build the city's defensive walls. This proves that the gate was not the work of a few individuals, but rather the achievement of a highly organized society capable of mobilizing resources and coordinating the construction of large-scale public projects. And perhaps the most astonishing part is that before this discovery, researchers believed that urbanization in Israel only began around 5,200 years ago. However, the discovery at Tel Arani has forced scientists to push that timeline back by approximately 300 years, opening a completely new perspective on the formation of the earliest cities in the region. Meanwhile, Dr. Yitzhak Paz, An expert on the early Bronze Age at the Israel Antiquities Authority stated that Tel Arani covers an area of approximately 37 acres and was once an important urban center in southwestern Israel. At this site, archaeologists identified clear signs of urban development, including planned residential areas, social hierarchy, and public structures. According to him, the newly discovered city gate has become a crucial piece of evidence, proving that urbanization in this region began much earlier than previously believed, during the final third of the 4th millennium BC. The mysterious passageway never before seen in history, beneath a 3,800-year-old ancient city in Israel. You know, the world of archaeology is truly mysterious and fascinating. Some discoveries bring joy to the entire world because they reveal another priceless ancient artifact. But there are also discoveries powerful enough to force us to rewrite the history of architecture itself. A perfect example of this is the discovery at Tel Shimron, an ancient city located in the Jezreel Valley of northern Israel. Once a center of power nearly 4 millennia ago, this site has now unexpectedly revealed a structure that no one had ever seen preserved in its complete form for hundreds of years. During excavations at Tel Shimron, a team of archaeologists discovered a mud brick passageway featuring a corbelled vault design, which was dated to approximately 3,800 years ago during the Middle Bronze Age. Researchers stated that this was the first time a passageway using the technique of stacked mud brick corbelled vaulting had been discovered in the southern Levant region. This discovery has therefore become especially significant for the study of ancient architectural history. Many people may wonder, what exactly is a corbelled vault, and why is it so important? In reality, this was a highly sophisticated construction technique. Bricks were placed on top of one another while gradually extending inward, causing the open space above to become narrower until a strong vaulted ceiling was created without the need for modern technology. This architectural style was once very common in Mesopotamia, but until now, a fully preserved example had never been found in Israel. That is why the discovery at Tel Shimron provides clear evidence of architectural exchange between the land of Canaan and the civilization of Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. The inscription, inside a Dead Sea cave, reveals a buried secret from 2,700 years ago. What do you think? If one day archaeologists entered a cave and discovered 4 nearly 2,000-year-old swords still perfectly preserved, would that already be considered the most valuable discovery? Most of us would probably say yes immediately, because ancient weapons like these are incredibly rare. However, archaeologists do not always see things the same way. For them, something far more valuable can sometimes be just a few faded lines of ink written on a stalactite column that has existed for thousands of years. It may sound unbelievable, right? How could a few small lines of writing be considered more important than ancient swords? What secrets could they possibly contain? And why have experts spent decades trying to recover every remaining character that has almost disappeared? To find the answer, let us travel to a cave overlooking the Dead Sea in Israel. Because it was here in September 2023 that archaeologists announced the discovery of 4 swords dating back nearly 2,000 years inside this cave. The weapons had survived for almost 2 millennia in an almost perfectly preserved condition, making them one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of the year. However, for researchers of biblical archaeology, these 4 swords unintentionally overshadowed an even more extraordinary discovery. That discovery was a new investigation into an ancient inscription from the First Temple period, dating back approximately 2,700 years. It is considered one of the rare surviving written records from this important historical era. In reality, this inscription was not newly discovered. It was first found by Ofra Aharoni, a guide from the En-Gedi Field School, in March 1973, inside this cave overlooking the Dead Sea in Israel. At the time, while surveying the cave, researchers discovered 9 lines of writing made with black ink on a massive stalactite column. What immediately attracted the attention of archaeologists was that this was not a typical inscription carved or engraved into stone. Instead, ancient people had used ink to write directly onto the surface of the stalactite. For a text more than 2,700 years old, the fact that the ink remained visible enough to recognize individual lines of writing was something almost unprecedented. In 1975, Polish-born Israeli archaeologist Pesa Bar Adon published the first study of this inscription in the Israel Exploration Journal. The inscription measured only about 5 by 6 inches, but the handwriting was remarkably neat and carefully formed, suggesting that the writer was an educated person or someone who had received formal training. Based on paleographic analysis, experts determined that the inscription was written between the late 8th century and early 7th century BC, placing it within the First Temple period. The inscription, inside a Dead Sea cave, reveals a buried secret from 2,700 years ago. What do you think? If one day archaeologists entered a cave and discovered 4 nearly 2,000-year-old swords still perfectly preserved, would that already be considered the most valuable discovery? Most of us would probably say yes immediately, because ancient weapons like these are incredibly rare. However, archaeologists do not always see things the same way. For them, something far more valuable can sometimes be just a few faded lines of ink written on a stalactite column that has existed for thousands of years. It may sound unbelievable, right? How could a few small lines of writing be considered more important than ancient swords? What secrets could they possibly contain? And why have experts spent decades trying to recover every remaining character that has almost disappeared? To find the answer, let us travel to a cave overlooking the Dead Sea in Israel. Because it was here, in September 2023, that archaeologists announced the discovery of 4 swords dating back nearly 2,000 years inside this cave. The weapons had survived for almost 2 millennia in an almost perfectly preserved condition, making them one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of the year. However, for researchers of biblical archaeology, these 4 swords unintentionally overshadowed an even more extraordinary discovery. That discovery was a new investigation into an ancient inscription from the First Temple period, dating back approximately 2,700 years. It is considered one of the rare surviving written records from this important historical era. In reality, this inscription was not newly discovered. It was first found by Ofra Aharoni, a guide from the Un-Gedi Field School, in March 1973, inside this cave overlooking the Dead Sea in Israel. At the time, while surveying the cave, researchers discovered 9 lines of writing made with black ink on a massive stalactite column. What immediately attracted the attention of archaeologists was that this was not a typical inscription carved or engraved into stone. Instead, ancient people had used ink to write directly onto the surface of the stalactite. For a text more than 2,700 years old, the fact that the ink remained visible enough to recognize individual lines of writing was something almost unprecedented. In 1975, Polish-born Israeli archaeologist Pesa Bar Adon published the first study of this inscription in the Israel Exploration Journal. The inscription measured only about 5 by 6 inches, but the handwriting was remarkably neat and carefully formed, suggesting that the writer was an educated person or someone who had received formal training. Based on paleographic analysis, experts determined that the inscription was written between the late 8th century and early 7th century BC, placing it within the First Temple period. Although many characters had been damaged by the passage of time, researchers were still able to identify several important parts of the text. The clearest phrase appeared in the first line: "Whoever erases this will be cursed." The following lines contained praises to God, blessings for the king, and a reference to a figure described as the master or owner. According to Professor Benjamin Mazar, the style of the inscription shows clear influence from the blessings and curses recorded in Deuteronomy chapters 27 and 28 of the Bible. But what caused experts to debate for many years was not the content of the inscription. It was the identity of the person who wrote it. According to Pesa Bar Adon, the writer may have been someone fleeing from war who sought refuge inside the cave. However, he also proposed another, more convincing possibility. Because this person carried ink, a writing tool, or a brush, and possessed such elegant handwriting, he may have been a scribe living in En-Gedi who came to this quiet place to pray or reflect. Standing before the magnificent landscape of the Dead Sea, he wrote words of praise and gratitude to God, unknowingly leaving behind a mystery that would last for nearly 3 millennia. Unfortunately, time erased much of the inscription's original content. Because of this, Dr. Asaf Geir from Ariel University in Israel decided to launch a new project aimed at decoding the hidden characters that remained invisible. He was joined by geologist Boaz Langford and photographer Shay Halevi from the Israel Antiquities Authority, IAA. Instead of relying only on the human eye, the research team used multispectral imaging technology, a technique capable of revealing traces of ink that are almost impossible to see with normal vision. After detailed photography and analysis, the researchers discovered an entirely new phrase that no one had previously been able to read: "in the Valley of Salt." This phrase appears many times in the Bible as a reference to the Dead Sea region. Even more importantly, the way the phrase "in the valley" was written on the inscription perfectly matches its usage in ancient biblical texts. According to Dr. Geyer, the existence of another non-biblical source mentioning this region provides extremely important archaeological evidence. He also believes that the person who left behind this inscription may have written these words as an expression of gratitude after surviving the dangers of the harsh landscape surrounding the Dead Sea. The ancient moat and underground channel system beneath ancient Jerusalem. Have you ever noticed that whenever Jerusalem, Israel is mentioned, most of us immediately think of its ancient walls, thousands-year-old religious structures, or the famous stories recorded in the Bible? Many people assume that this city has already been studied so extensively that there is almost nothing left that could truly surprise archaeologists. But archaeology has one fascinating characteristic. The deeper researchers dig, the more secrets they uncover, and this time was no different. Right in the city of David, the place considered the birthplace of ancient Jerusalem, archaeologists discovered a structure that no one even knew existed for many years. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is that it was not found inside a temple or hidden within an ancient tomb. Instead, it was uncovered directly beneath the Givati parking lot, located in the city of David, Jerusalem, an area where countless people pass by every day. What do you think could possibly be hidden beneath a modern parking lot that would leave the entire archaeological community stunned? The answer is a massive moat carved directly through the natural bedrock, accompanied by a mysterious underground channel system that scientists still cannot determine the exact purpose of. Not only that, but this discovery is also providing a completely new perspective on how ancient people planned and constructed Jerusalem thousands of years ago. So what role did this ancient moat once serve? Was it built for defense, to divide different parts of the city, or did it have an entirely different purpose? Let us follow the clues uncovered by archaeologists and explore the mystery hidden deep beneath Jerusalem. The story began during the first half of this year, when excavations continued at the Givati parking lot. The research team discovered a massive cut running from west to east, carved directly into the natural bedrock of the hill. This structure was so large that it created a clear boundary, almost completely separating the Ophel Ridge to the north from the City of David Ridge to the south. After examination, experts confirmed that this was not a natural geological crack, but rather evidence of a human-made structure created through enormous physical labor. Its sheer size alone was enough for researchers to conclude that constructing it must have required a tremendous amount of time, manpower, and resources. However, the biggest question troubling archaeologists is that they still cannot determine exactly when this moat was created. According to the research team, there is currently no direct evidence that can provide a precise date for the construction. Nevertheless, archaeological remains indicate that the moat definitely existed before the late Iron Age II and early Iron Age III periods, because by that time it had already been reused for another purpose. This means the structure could be far older than what scientists are currently able to confirm. Researchers believe that this moat may have functioned as an intentionally created boundary designed to separate Upper Jerusalem from Lower Jerusalem. Of course, this is still only a hypothesis, but if this interpretation is correct, then the structure was not simply an ordinary excavation project. Instead, it reflects the way ancient people organized and planned their city from the earliest stages of its development. It also suggests that ancient Jerusalem may have been designed with far more careful planning than previously believed. Just imagine for a moment, how much human effort would have been required to carve a massive moat through solid rock using only primitive tools thousands of years ago? This was certainly not a task that a small group of people could complete within a short period of time. For this reason, many experts believe that this structure reflects the existence of a powerful administrative system capable of mobilizing and coordinating large numbers of workers, something usually found only in major centers of political power. Even more interestingly, this discovery has also been connected with several other famous structures from the Iron Age II period. In their research report, archaeologists suggested that the moat may have been part of a large-scale construction program that transformed the entire urban landscape of Jerusalem. Structures from the same period include the step-stone structure, the large stone structure, which many scholars believe may have been the palace of King David, as well as the royal district of Ophel. According to researchers, all of these structures reflect the same royal planning vision during the period when Jerusalem began developing into an important political and power center of the region. But the surprises did not end there. Right beside the massive moat, archaeologists discovered an underground stone channel system buried deep beneath the surface. These channels have a very unusual design, branching into multiple smaller sections that resemble fingers extending outward from a central passage. This unique shape has led researchers to propose several different theories, but so far, no final conclusion has been reached. One leading theory suggests that these stone channels may have been used for soaking flax plants as part of the production process for linen, a highly valuable material in the ancient world. Meanwhile, some other experts believe that the system could have been connected to the production of date honey, a product that was once extremely common throughout the Middle East. Regardless of which theory is correct, the existence of these channels demonstrates that the inhabitants of ancient Jerusalem possessed impressive technical skills and a remarkable ability to utilize natural resources. As you can see, the more researchers study Jerusalem, the more they realize that this ancient city still holds countless secrets waiting to be uncovered. From a single excavation beneath a parking lot, archaeologists have discovered a massive moat and an underground channel network that no one previously knew existed. Although many questions remain unanswered, every new discovery helps us better understand how the city of David was planned, how Jerusalem developed during its earliest periods, and just how advanced ancient construction techniques truly were thousands of years ago. What do you think? Could there still be more hidden secrets waiting beneath the ground of Jerusalem? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you know anything interesting about this ancient city, share it with us so we can continue exploring and discussing its mysteries together. The tomb of Jesus that has sparked controversy for decades. What do you think? If one day archaeologists announced that they had discovered a tomb that could possibly be the final resting place of Jesus, would you immediately believe it, or would you want to wait for more evidence? This is one of the most sensitive and controversial topics in the history of archaeology. For hundreds of years, countless searches have been carried out, and many different locations have been proposed as the place where Jesus was buried. However, until today, there is still no conclusion that all scholars completely agree upon. Yet a recent discovery in Jerusalem, Israel has once again reignited this long-running debate. What makes this discovery especially unique is that this time, researchers did not use traditional excavation methods with shovels and tools. Instead, they used a remotely controlled robotic arm to explore a tomb that had remained sealed for many years. And what they observed inside raised a series of questions that continue to challenge both archaeologists and theologians as they search for answers. The story began when archaeologists started studying a tomb dating back to approximately the 1st century AD, located beneath a tower in Jerusalem. Based on initial evaluations, this could be one of the most important ancient burial sites ever discovered in the region. What immediately caught the attention of experts was the lid of a stone coffin inside the tomb, which contained an inscription written in ancient Greek. The meaning of the inscription has been translated as, "Divine Lord, raise up the one who is inside," or interpreted as a prayer asking God to grant resurrection. For many researchers, this detail carries extraordinary religious significance, but the discovery did not end there. On the same coffin, archaeologists also found an image of a fish holding an object in its mouth. According to researchers, this image may be connected to the biblical story of the prophet Jonah and the great fish, a symbol familiar in early Christianity and often associated with death and resurrection. It was the combination of the ancient Greek inscription and the fish symbol that led many people to ask, could this be evidence of a very early Christian community? The coffin was discovered at a depth of approximately 197 feet inside a burial complex known as the Jesus Family Tomb. In reality, this site is not a newly discovered location. It was first uncovered in the 1980s and immediately sparked intense controversy. However, at that time, The excavation only lasted for a short period because it faced protests from some Orthodox Jewish groups who feared that continued excavation could damage the archaeological site. As a result, the tomb was quickly sealed, and a tower was later constructed directly above the area. Now think about this. If a location is both highly controversial and has been sealed for many years, how can researchers continue studying it without destroying its original condition? That very question led to a highly unusual solution. In 2010, with permission from the Israeli government, biblical scholar James Tabor from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in the United States, along with documentary filmmaker Simcha Jacobovici, decided to use a remotely operated robotic arm to lower cameras and recording equipment into the tomb. Thanks to this technology, they were able to observe and document the entire area without reopening the tomb through traditional excavation methods. During the investigation, the research team also discovered another separate chamber located directly beneath the courtyard of the building above, known as the patio area. They named this section the Patio Tomb. It was here that researchers continued to document additional ancient inscriptions carved into stone, and they suggested that these details could provide further evidence supporting the theory that this may have been the resting place of Jesus. The discoveries did not stop there. James Tabor also proposed the theory that this burial complex may have been built on land donated by Joseph of Arimathea. According to the Gospels, Joseph of Arimathea was the person who requested Jesus' body and arranged his burial after his crucifixion. In addition, Tabor suggested that the combination of the fish symbol and the ancient Greek inscription could represent a belief in resurrection, one of the central foundations of early Christianity. However, like many archaeological discoveries connected to biblical figures, this theory has not been accepted by all experts. Some theories have even suggested that Jesus may have been buried here together with Mary Magdalene. However, many leading theologians and archaeologists argue that this claim lacks sufficient scientific evidence and archaeological proof for confirmation. Therefore, until today, the question of whether this is truly the tomb of Jesus remains unanswered. As you can see, archaeology is sometimes not only a journey to discover ancient artifacts, but also a search for answers to questions that have existed for thousands of years. The discovery in Jerusalem, Israel has certainly provided researchers with important new information to continue studying and analyzing. Although the theory about the tomb of Jesus remains highly debated and has not been confirmed, the ancient Greek inscriptions, the fish symbol, and the robotic exploration have transformed this site into one of the most fascinating archaeological locations of recent years. At this moment, the mystery has not yet been completely solved, but who knows? With the continued advancement of technology in the future, the secrets still hidden beneath the ground of Jerusalem may eventually be revealed, giving us clearer answers about one of the most influential figures in human history. It is certainly possible, because as you can see, with the endless progress of the modern world, almost nothing is impossible. If humanity can travel toward Mars, explore the moon, and dive into the deepest parts of the ocean, then uncovering a mystery like this may not be impossible either. The only question is when it will happen, and how long we will have to wait. What do you think? Solomon's 3,000-year-old palace, the wealthiest king of the ancient world. There is something quite fascinating about archaeology that many of you may have noticed as well. Not every discovery that shakes the world begins with a treasure filled with gold and silver or a perfectly preserved tomb. Sometimes, everything begins with nothing more than a few ruined stone walls lying silently beneath the ground. Yet, as archaeologists continue digging deeper, they often realize that they are standing before the remains of a structure that once ranked among the largest and most impressive buildings in the region thousands of years ago. And this time, the story takes place in the ancient city of Gezer, Israel. During research at this archaeological site, archaeologists discovered the foundations of a massive ancient palace, a structure larger than most buildings constructed during the same period. After determining that the palace dated back to the 10th century BC, many experts immediately thought of a famous figure from history and the Bible. So, who was the king who ruled Israel during exactly this period? Yes, it was King Solomon, a ruler known for his extraordinary wisdom, great power, and wealth that amazed people throughout the ancient world. Although the archaeological team has emphasized that there is still no direct evidence proving that this palace belonged to Solomon, the historical context, construction date, and impressive scale of the structure strongly suggest that it was closely connected to the period of his reign. This is exactly what has made the discovery one of the most discussed archaeological excavations in Israel. Because if current theories continue to gain support, this discovery could help us better understand one of the most legendary kings ever mentioned in the Bible. According to excavation results, the palace was built during the 10th century BC, precisely during the reign of King Solomon over the Kingdom of Israel. In biblical accounts, Solomon was not only famous as a wise king, but was also described as one of the most powerful and wealthiest rulers of the ancient world. The Bible even records that during his 40-year reign, Solomon received approximately 25 metric tons of gold each year, making him one of the richest kings in human history. Solomon is also believed to have played an important role in strengthening and developing the foundations of the ancient Jewish state. Because of this, any discovery connected to this historical period immediately attracts worldwide attention from archaeologists. What impressed experts the most was the enormous scale of the palace. Based on the remaining foundations and architectural remains, researchers determined that the structure was larger than most buildings constructed during the same era. This suggests that it was not the residence of an ordinary person, but more likely a royal building or an important administrative center of the city of Gezer. In addition to uncovering impressive architectural remains, archaeologists also recovered many valuable artifacts that help reconstruct the lives of the people who once lived there. Among these discoveries were Philistine pottery, a statue of the goddess Ashdodda, several amulets, and even a small rattle drum designed for children. You see, sometimes it is these small and seemingly ordinary objects that tell us the most about how people lived 3,000 years ago. They reveal that this location was once a thriving center, where not only elites lived, but where the culture and religious beliefs of an entire historical period were also reflected. However, like many ancient cities throughout history, Gezer could not escape the destruction of war. According to researchers, this palace was destroyed around 935 BC during the attack of Pharaoh Shishak, also known as Shishak in the Bible. This Egyptian pharaoh launched a campaign against the city of Gezer during the 10th century BC, leaving behind evidence of destruction that can still be seen in archaeological layers today. Interestingly, although the palace was almost completely destroyed after the attack, archaeologists did not find many valuable possessions inside. According to Steve Ortiz, a professor at the Tandy Museum at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Texas, it is very possible that the people living there knew the attack was coming. Because of this, they may have had enough time to remove most of their belongings and valuable possessions from the palace before the Egyptian army arrived. This also explains why archaeologists discovered only remaining fragments rather than a massive treasure hoard, as many people might imagine. Think about it. If the people who lived in this palace truly managed to evacuate their valuables, could there still be other undiscovered locations somewhere nearby that contain artifacts once belonging to this ancient structure? That is exactly what makes archaeology so fascinating. Every new discovery does not simply answer one mystery, it also creates many more questions waiting to be solved. At the present time, archaeologists still cannot confirm that this was definitely the palace of King Solomon. However, the age of the structure, its impressive scale, and the historical context all show that the discovery at Gezer, Israel, has a very strong connection to the era of this legendary king. And perhaps in future excavations, the missing pieces of this ancient puzzle will continue to be uncovered, bringing us closer to the truth about one of the most famous and mysterious figures in biblical history. The 3,300-year-old shipwreck beneath the Mediterranean Sea, rewriting the history of ancient maritime trade. More than 3,300 years ago, a ship loaded with goods quietly departed from a harbor, crossing the Mediterranean Sea on a voyage that seemed no different from countless others before it. No one knows exactly what happened afterward. Perhaps a sudden storm struck in the middle of the open sea, or perhaps the ship encountered pirates, a common danger during the late Bronze Age period. All we know is that the vessel disappeared without leaving behind any trace. For more than 3 millennia, it remained silently resting on the ocean floor, as if forgotten by time. But then, an extraordinary discovery occurred when an offshore survey near the coast of Israel accidentally led scientists to this hidden secret. What appeared before them was not simply an ancient shipwreck, but an incredible time capsule revealing the story of maritime civilization more than 3,000 years ago. This remarkable discovery was announced after a natural gas exploration vessel operated by Archaeological detected an unusual structure beneath the Mediterranean seabed, approximately 56 miles off the coast of Israel. When the survey equipment transmitted images back to researchers, experts quickly determined that the object was an ancient ship resting at a depth of about 1.1 miles beneath the surface of the sea. Immediately afterward, the Israel Antiquities Authority (IAA) worked together with Archaeological to conduct further research and confirmed that this was the oldest deep-sea shipwreck ever discovered in the eastern Mediterranean. The discovery was considered extremely significant for global archaeology. According to initial research results, the ship dates back approximately 3,300 years to the 14th century BC. What is truly astonishing is that despite remaining on the ocean floor for thousands of years, much of the cargo inside the ship has survived in almost perfect condition. Archaeologists recorded hundreds of amphora pottery jars still resting in their original positions. These types of containers were widely used during the late Bronze Age to transport goods such as oil, wine, and other valuable products across international trade routes. You know, after more than 3,000 years, for these jars to still maintain their original shape is an incredibly rare occurrence, isn't it? Because of this, the Archaeological survey team carefully recovered 2 representative amphora jars from the ship, which is estimated to have been approximately 39 to 46 feet long, for further study. Based on their shape and manufacturing characteristics, experts determined that these jars originated from the Levant region, an area that once contained many thriving port cities and served as a major center of international maritime trade. These trade networks are even believed to have connected with extremely distant regions, including areas as far away as Britain. According to Jacob Sharvit, head of the Marine Archaeology Unit at the Israel Antiquities Authority, the most likely causes of the shipwreck were either a powerful storm or an unsuccessful pirate attack, events that were relatively common during the end of the Bronze Age. However, what truly amazed archaeologists was not only the ship itself, but also the location where it was discovered. The vessel was found approximately 56 miles from the Israeli coastline, so far from land that ancient sailors would have been unable to see the shore. This discovery completely changed a long-accepted theory. Previously, researchers believed that Bronze Age ships mainly traveled by following coastlines, moving from one port to another in order to avoid becoming lost in the open sea. This belief was based largely on 2 famous shipwrecks, Gelidonia and Uluburun, both discovered off the coast of Turkey and located relatively close to land. However, the newly discovered shipwreck off Israel revealed something completely different. According to Jacob Sharvit, this is the first ship ever discovered in such deep waters and at such a great distance from the coastline. This proves that sailors more than 3,300 years ago possessed far more advanced navigation skills than previously believed. They were not simply traveling along coastal routes. Instead, they were capable of crossing open seas, most likely by observing the sun, stars, and the positions of celestial bodies to determine direction. Another aspect that greatly excited scientists was the almost perfect preservation of the shipwreck. Resting at a depth of approximately 1.1 miles, where it was largely protected from powerful waves, strong currents, and human activity, the ship appears to have been almost frozen in time. According to experts, this represents a rare opportunity to study an ancient vessel in a nearly untouched condition, something extremely difficult to achieve with shipwrecks located in shallow waters. Jacob Sharvit also pointed out that the amphora jars discovered on the ship share many similarities with images carved in the tomb of Khenamun at Thebes, Egypt, dating back to the 15th century BC. In this famous artwork, researchers can see scenes of Canaanite ships unloading sealed amphora jars. This detail provides even stronger evidence of the highly developed maritime trade networks that connected ancient civilizations. According to Shal Zemak, CEO of Archaeology in Israel, the success of the project was the result of close cooperation between Archaeology and the Israel Antiquities Authority. He stated that the company's technical team was extremely proud to have contributed to a discovery of such great importance for history and archaeology. Today, the artifacts recovered from the ship will be displayed at the J.N. Schottenstein National Campus for the Archaeology of Israel, while scientists continue studying the remaining parts of the shipwreck still resting on the seabed. If you ever have the opportunity, Visiting this place in person would surely be an unforgettable experience, because seeing this ancient ship with your own eyes is far more incredible than simply hearing about it through stories. The 2,700-year-old Black Seal in Jerusalem, a mysterious clue that may reveal a biblical figure. More than 2,700 years ago, in the ancient city of Jerusalem, there was a man who owned a small but incredibly important object. It was not a powerful sword, a golden piece of jewelry, or a valuable treasure. It was simply a small black stone seal that could fit in the palm of his hand. Yet for people living at that time, this tiny object could represent status, authority, and even the identity of its owner. Then, as time passed, the kingdoms and civilizations that once existed slowly disappeared. The man who owned this seal was forgotten by history, and the small object was buried deep beneath the ground of Jerusalem for thousands of years. But can you believe that a single accidental excavation brought it back into the light and opened a question that has captured the attention of many researchers? Could this seal have once belonged to a figure mentioned in the Bible? This remarkable discovery was made in Jerusalem, Israel, during archaeological excavations carried out by the Israel Antiquities Authority, IAA, in cooperation with the City of David Foundation in the area along the southern wall of the Temple Mount. After careful examination, experts determined that this seal belonged to the First Temple period, an important era in the history of the Kingdom of Judah, dating back to approximately the 7th century BC. At first glance, a small seal may not seem particularly impressive, but in archaeology, it is often these seemingly ordinary objects that can reveal the story of an entire civilization. In the past, Jerusalem has already produced hundreds of clay seal impressions created using similar seals. However, finding the actual stone seal used to make those impressions is extremely rare. Today, Jerusalem leads the region in the number of inscribed seals discovered from the Iron Age, with approximately 30 examples. By comparison, other important cities of the Kingdom of Judah, such as Arad, have produced only about 5 seals, while Lachish has yielded only 4. This demonstrates that Jerusalem was once an especially important administrative, political, and power center. But what makes this newly discovered artifact even more fascinating lies on its surface. The seal was carved from black stone and features an incredibly detailed image at its center, a winged figure. Surrounding this image is an inscription written in ancient Hebrew that reads, "Belonging to Jehoazer, son of Hoshayahu." Just imagine this. After nearly 3,000 years, the name of a person who once lived in Jerusalem has appeared again on such a small object. Isn't it almost like discovering an identity document belonging to someone who disappeared from history? According to archaeologists, this seal was not only valuable for administrative purposes, but may also have carried spiritual significance. The reason is that it contains a hole drilled vertically through its body, allowing its owner to wear it around the neck like a protective amulet. At the same time, because the inscription was carved in reverse, the seal could be pressed onto official documents to create readable impressions. Dr. Filip Vukosavovich, an archaeologist and expert on Assyrian culture at the Israel Antiquities Authority, stated that this was an exceptionally rare discovery. This is because it is the first time that an image of a genie-like figure or a winged protective being has been found on an archaeological seal in Israel and the surrounding region. This type of imagery originated from the art of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a powerful civilization that dominated the ancient Near East from approximately the 9th to the 7th century BC. Such winged figures were often viewed as protective symbols, believed to possess supernatural power that could guard and protect their owners. Experts suggest that the seal may have originally featured only the winged figure and was used by a man named Hoshayahu as a personal protective object. Later, his son Jehoazer may have inherited the seal and added his own name along with his father's name on both sides of the image. This could explain why the inscription appears much simpler than the detailed carving at the center. And this is exactly what makes the discovery so remarkable. Because the name Jehoazer, son of Hoshayahu, has caused some researchers to consider a possible connection with a figure mentioned in the Bible. In the book of Jeremiah 43:2, there is a reference to a man named Azariah, son of Hoshea. Although the names appear differently when translated into English, in ancient Hebrew they are closely related in meaning. Both names carry a meaning connected to the help and support of Yahweh, God. However, archaeologists remain extremely cautious. At present, there is not enough evidence to prove that this seal actually belonged to the biblical figure mentioned in Scripture. But if this connection could be confirmed in the future, it would become one of the rare discoveries directly linking archaeology with individuals recorded in ancient texts. The 2,500-year-old Cyrus cylinder. Did an artifact from Iraq prove a biblical prophecy was true? Can you believe that a small artifact measuring less than 9 inches long, buried beneath the soil of Iraq for more than 2,000 years, could be powerful enough to make both archaeologists and biblical scholars reconsider long-debated historical questions? What makes it even more remarkable is that this artifact is not a golden statue or a priceless treasure. Instead, it is simply a clay cylinder covered with ancient cuneiform inscriptions. Yet those inscriptions tell the story of a powerful king, a mighty empire, and a decision that changed the fate of an entire nation. That artifact is the Cyrus cylinder, one of the most famous archaeological treasures connected to the Bible. It was discovered in 1879 by archaeologist Hormuzd Rassam among the ruins of ancient Babylon in present-day Iraq during an excavation conducted on behalf of the British Museum. Although it measures only about 8.9 inches long and 3.9 inches in diameter and is made entirely of baked clay densely inscribed with Akkadian cuneiform, its historical significance far exceeds its modest size. In fact, many scholars consider it one of the most important documents supporting events recorded in the Bible. A replica of the cylinder is even displayed at the United Nations headquarters as a symbol of peace and human rights. What makes the Cyrus cylinder truly extraordinary is the message carved into its surface. The inscription records a proclamation issued by Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, after he conquered Babylon in 539 BC and defeated its last king, Nabonidus. On the cylinder, Cyrus declares that he restored the gods of many conquered lands to their original temples, allowed peoples who had been exiled by Babylon to return to their homelands, and supported the rebuilding of temples that had been destroyed. If that sounds familiar, there's a good reason. It closely parallels the account found in the book of Ezra in the Bible, which states that King Cyrus permitted the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple of God. According to the biblical account, he also returned the sacred treasures that had been taken from Jerusalem by King Nebuchadnezzar. Perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is that during the 19th century, many skeptical scholars believed the biblical account was nothing more than legend. They found it difficult to believe that a foreign emperor would willingly free captive peoples and help them rebuild their homelands. However, when the Cyrus cylinder was unearthed in Babylon, its ancient inscriptions confirmed that such actions were indeed part of Cyrus the Great's official governing policy, not a fictional story created centuries later. Although the cylinder does not mention the Jewish people by name, it clearly demonstrates that Cyrus's policy of allowing exiled peoples to return home and restore their temples was a genuine historical practice. Beyond its archaeological and religious importance, the Cyrus cylinder also offers a fascinating glimpse into the governing philosophy of the ancient Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great was renowned not only for his military conquests and territorial expansion, but also for a level of religious and cultural tolerance that was exceptionally rare in the ancient world. By respecting the beliefs of conquered peoples, allowing them to return to their native lands, and permitting the restoration of their religious centers, he helped build one of history's most powerful multicultural empires. For that reason, more than 2 millennia later, the Cyrus cylinder is regarded not merely as an archaeological artifact, but also as a symbol of reconciliation, religious freedom, and the possibility of peaceful coexistence among diverse cultures. As you can see, the more we learn about this small clay cylinder, the more we realize that sometimes the most ordinary-looking artifacts become the crucial missing pieces that illuminate an entire chapter of history that remained disputed for thousands of years. Pretty fascinating, isn't it? The 3,200-year-old Merneptah stele, the Egyptian evidence that makes the biblical history of Israel impossible to ignore. Imagine this. One day, archaeologists uncover an ancient stone monument carved more than 3,200 years ago, and engraved on it is the unmistakable name of a people who still exist today. Just think about how groundbreaking such a discovery would be. What makes this finding even more extraordinary is that the monument wasn't discovered in Israel. It was found in Egypt, the very nation that the Bible repeatedly mentions in the story of the Exodus. And with this single discovery, one of the longest-running debates between archaeology and the Bible gained an incredibly important new piece of evidence. The artifact we're talking about is the Merneptah Stele, also known as the Israel Stele or the Victory Stele of Merneptah. This massive granite monument was discovered in 1896 by British archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie in the ancient city of Thebes, Egypt. Standing approximately 7 to 10 feet tall, the stele is inscribed with 25 lines of Egyptian hieroglyphs and dates to around 1205 BC. Its primary purpose was to celebrate the military victories of Pharaoh Merneptah, who ruled Egypt from approximately 1213 to 1203 BC, and was the 13th son of the famous Pharaoh Ramesses II. At first glance, the monument appears to be just another victory inscription, much like hundreds of others from ancient Egypt. But if you read the final lines, you'll encounter a name that immediately caught the attention of archaeologists around the world. Israel. The inscription declares, "Canaan is plundered with every evil. Ashkelon has been conquered. Gezer has been captured. Yanoam has been wiped out. Israel is laid waste. Its offspring are no more." Of course, we know that Israel did not disappear as Merneptah proudly claimed. According to the Bible, as well as numerous historical records, the people of Israel continued living and developing in the land of Canaan for roughly 6 more centuries. But what makes this inscription priceless isn't its boastful claim of victory. Its true significance is that it represents the oldest and clearest non-biblical reference to Israel ever discovered. Have you noticed another fascinating detail? Before the Merneptah Stele was discovered, many scholars believe the Exodus took place relatively late, around 1270 BC. However, once that proposed date is compared with the dating of the stele, the timeline begins to fall apart. If the Exodus occurred around 1270 BC, that would leave only a little more than 60 years for the Israelites to leave Egypt, wander in the wilderness for 40 years, conquer the land of Canaan, and establish themselves as a people significant enough for Pharaoh Merneptah to mention them as an enemy worthy of recording among his military victories. That simply isn't much time for all those events to have taken place. On the other hand, if we follow the date recorded in 1 Kings 6:1, which places the Exodus around 1446 BC, the pieces fit together remarkably well. Under that timeline, the Israelites would have had nearly 2 centuries to settle in Canaan, grow as a community, and become a substantial population before Merneptah launched his military campaign around 1207 BC. For this reason, many researchers regard the Merneptah Stele as one of the strongest pieces of archaeological evidence supporting the early date of the Exodus described in the Bible. Its significance doesn't end there. The way the Egyptians wrote the name Israel on the stele is meaningful in itself. The hieroglyphic determinative accompanying the name does not indicate a city or a kingdom. Instead, it identifies a people or ethnic group. This suggests that at the time, Israel was recognized as a large, organized community, but most likely had not yet become a monarchy, a description that closely matches the period of the judges as portrayed in the Bible. This is one of the details that Egyptologists and archaeologists find especially significant because it helps establish Israel's place within the broader timeline of ancient history. Even more interestingly, the Bible states that when the Israelites entered Canaan, they inherited existing cities and homes rather than building everything from scratch. As a result, major cultural transformations and widespread rebuilding efforts don't become clearly visible until around 1200 BC, precisely the period archaeologists identify as the transition into the Iron Age in Canaan. Some experts have even suggested that portions of this rebuilding may have been connected to the aftermath of Merneptah's military campaign. That is why, even today, the Merneptah Stele is regarded as one of the most important archaeological discoveries related to the Bible. Not only does it contain the oldest known extra-biblical inscription mentioning Israel, but it also strengthens the chronology of several historical events, challenges the theory of a late Exodus, and demonstrates that the people of Israel were already living in the land of Canaan more than 3,200 years ago. It's remarkable to think that just a few lines carved into an ancient Egyptian stone monument could provide compelling new evidence for an entire chapter of history that had been debated for centuries. That's what makes archaeology so fascinating, isn't it? The 2,800-year-old Moabite stone in Jordan, an ancient monument, reveals a biblical war and the earliest mention of the God of Israel. Have you ever wondered how an ancient king would preserve the story of his greatest victory for future generations when there were no books, no cameras, and certainly no internet? The answer is simple. The only way to ensure the story survived for thousands of years was to carve it into stone. And sometimes, inscriptions that were originally intended to glorify a king's military achievements end up becoming invaluable evidence confirming events recorded in the Bible. That is exactly the fascinating story behind the Moabite stone, also known as the Mesha Stele, one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made in Jordan. In 1868, Anglican missionary Frederick Klein accidentally discovered this black basalt monument in Dibon, Jordan, a site that was once part of the ancient kingdom of Moab. Carved across its surface are 34 lines of the Moabite language, recording the victories of King Mesha, who ruled Moab around 840 BC. What astonished archaeologists was how closely the inscription matched the account recorded in 2 Kings chapter 3 of the Bible. If you've read the Bible, you'll know that Moab was once a vassal state of Israel. According to 2 Kings 3:4-6, King Mesha was a wealthy sheep breeder who was required to pay Israel an annual tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after the death of King Ahab, Mesha rebelled against Israel. In response, King Jehoram assembled an army from Samaria to suppress the rebellion. For many years, some people viewed this account as nothing more than a biblical story. Then the Moabite stone offered an entirely different perspective, because this time, the war was being described by Moab itself. The opening lines proudly introduce the king. "I am Mesha, son of Chemosh, king of Moab, the Dibonite." He then explains that Omri, king of Israel, had oppressed Moab for many years because Chemosh, the god of Moab, had become angry with his people. Mesha also states that Omri's son continued this domination until he finally rose up, defeated Israel, and restored Moab's independence. According to Mesha's own account, Israel suffered a crushing defeat, while he rebuilt numerous cities and erected temples in honor of Chemosh, the supreme god of the Moabites. By this point, you've probably noticed something especially interesting. Although each side tells the story in a way that favors itself, both the Bible and the Moabite stone independently confirm that a Moabite rebellion against Israel actually took place. That is precisely why archaeologists consider this artifact so valuable. It represents one of the rare occasions where two completely independent historical sources describe the same event. The Moabite stone does more than confirm the conflict between these two kingdoms. It also contains several other remarkable details. First, it confirms that Chemosh truly was the chief deity of the Moabites, exactly as described in the Bible. It also identifies Mesha as a sheep breeder, perfectly matching the description found in 2 Kings. These seemingly minor details help researchers strengthen the historical credibility of ancient records. Perhaps the most significant feature of all, however, appears in lines 17 and 18 of the inscription. While listing the spoils of war taken after his victory, Mesha refers to the altar vessels of Yahweh, the God of Israel. This is widely regarded as the earliest known extra-biblical reference to Yahweh ever discovered. That fact alone makes the Moabite stone an artifact of extraordinary importance to both archaeology and the history of religion. But the story doesn't end there. In 1994, French scholar André Lemaire re-examined the inscription and identified a previously damaged character, leading him to propose a new reading of the phrase, House of David. If this interpretation is correct, then the Moabite stone not only mentions Yahweh, but also becomes one of the earliest non-biblical documents ever discovered that refers to King David and his royal dynasty. This proposal sparked considerable debate among archaeologists, while at the same time opening an exciting new avenue of research into the history of the ancient kingdom of Israel. Today, more than 2,800 years after it was carved, the Moabite stone remains one of the most significant artifacts in biblical archaeology. From a single basalt monument resting quietly in the land of Jordan, it has confirmed the Moabite rebellion, preserved one of the earliest references to Yahweh, may contain evidence of the Davidic dynasty, and provides the rare perspective of Israel's own adversary. Sometimes, all it takes is one stone monument engraved with just a few dozen lines to illuminate an entire chapter of history that scholars are still debating today. Isn't that absolutely fascinating? The 2,600-year-old Silver Scrolls from Jerusalem, the oldest biblical text ever discovered that astonished scholars. Can you imagine that one of the oldest biblical passages in the world wasn't discovered in a library or inside a temple, but was instead hidden inside a tiny amulet buried beside the dead for more than 2,600 years? It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? Yet this is a completely true story. Even more remarkable, this discovery forced scholars to re-examine several theories that had long been accepted as fact. The story began in 1979 to 1980, when archaeologist Gabriel Barkay led an excavation at Kitef Hinnom, an ancient cemetery located on the edge of the Hinnom Valley, southwest of Jerusalem's Old City in present-day Israel. Among a series of burial chambers dating to the First Temple period, the excavation team uncovered more than 1,000 artifacts of various kinds. But among all those burial objects, they discovered two tiny silver scrolls, each crafted from 99% pure silver. When fully unrolled, the larger scroll measured only about 3.7 inches long and 1 inch wide. At the time, no one knew what was hidden inside the scrolls. The only thing experts knew for certain was that they were incredibly fragile. One wrong move while opening them could cause the entire artifact to crumble into countless pieces. For that reason, two museums refused to open them, unwilling to risk destroying artifacts that had survived for more than 2,000 years simply to satisfy human curiosity. Eventually, conservation specialists at the Israel Museum agreed to take on the challenge. After an extraordinarily delicate conservation process using meticulous techniques, both silver scrolls were successfully opened. And just as many had hoped, they did not contain magical spells or ancient curses. Instead, they revealed exquisitely engraved Hebrew inscriptions. When the inscriptions were translated, they astonished the world. One of the passages closely matched the priestly blessing found in Numbers 6:24-26. "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." The inscription on the silver scrolls contains nearly the same blessing. "May God bless you and keep you. May God make his face shine upon you and grant you peace." But the surprises didn't end there. Based on the style of the script and the surrounding archaeological evidence, researchers determined that the scrolls date to the late 7th century to the early 6th century BC, meaning they were created roughly 500 years before the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. That makes them the oldest biblical texts ever discovered. Then, in 1994, advances in high-resolution digital imaging allowed scholars to identify several faded characters that had previously been impossible to read. On the first silver amulet, researchers found wording referring to God's covenant, his mercy toward those who love him, and those who keep his commandments, closely resembling Deuteronomy 7:9. In addition, both amulets repeatedly mention YHWH, the sacred name of God in the Hebrew Bible. As a result, they became the earliest known extra-biblical artifacts ever discovered to preserve this divine name. You may find this especially fascinating. For many years, some scholars argued that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, was not compiled until after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC, or perhaps even later during the Babylonian exile. If that theory were correct, these biblical passages could not possibly appear on silver scrolls that were created several decades earlier. That is precisely why the discovery at Kitef Hinnom sparked such intense debate among biblical scholars and archaeologists. To address the issue, in 2004, 4 experts from 4 independent research institutions re-examined the complete set of high-resolution images of the silver scrolls. Their conclusion was clear. The paleographic characteristics of the inscriptions match the late First Temple period, before the Babylonian exile, and this dating has now been accepted by the majority of scholars. This indicates that at least portions of the Torah were already being copied, circulated, and used during the 7th century BC, much earlier than some previous theories had suggested. Researchers have also connected this discovery with the Masad Hashavyahu Ostracon, another artifact from the same period that likewise reflects knowledge of the laws found in the Torah. When these pieces of evidence are considered together, they align remarkably well with the account in 2 Chronicles 34, which tells of the reign of King Josiah when the Book of the Law was discovered during the restoration of the Temple, triggering a major religious reform throughout Judah. It is entirely possible that from that time onward, passages of Scripture began to be used more widely in religious practices, including the placement of protective amulets in tombs such as those at Kitef Hinnom. Even today, these two tiny silver scrolls remain one of the most valuable archaeological discoveries connected to the Bible. Not only do they contain the oldest biblical passages ever found, but they also demonstrate the extraordinary accuracy with which Jewish scribes preserved and copied sacred texts for more than 2,500 years. From two small pieces of silver resting quietly inside an ancient tomb in Jerusalem, Israel, an entire chapter in the history of the Bible's composition and transmission has been brought to light, providing archaeologists with compelling evidence that many sacred biblical texts existed far earlier than scholars once believed. The 2,700-year-old Lachish reliefs, stone-carved scenes of war, confirm a battle recorded in the Bible. Imagine this. Nearly 2,700 years ago, someone created a documentary film recording every moment of a great battle, from the moment an invading army arrived at the city walls, to the destruction machines crushing the defenses, and finally to the scene of defeated soldiers being brought before a victorious king. If such a record existed, would we still have to debate whether that battle actually happened? The fascinating truth is that this film was not written on paper, nor passed down through legends. Instead, it was carefully carved into massive stone panels that have survived until today. This is the story of the Lachish reliefs, one of the most famous archaeological masterpieces connected to the Bible, and one of the rare visual records that allows us to witness a battle that took place nearly 3,000 years ago. The story begins at the ancient city of Lachish, located in modern-day Israel. Lachish was once a heavily fortified stronghold and the second largest city of the Kingdom of Judah, surpassed only by Jerusalem. Around 701 BC, King Sennacherib of the Assyrian Empire launched a massive military campaign to conquer the rebellious cities of Judah. This event is recorded in 2 Chronicles 32, 9-10, where the Bible describes how, while Sennacherib and his entire army were surrounding Lachish, he sent messengers to Jerusalem to threaten King Hezekiah and the people of Judah, attempting to force their surrender without a direct battle. Many centuries later, archaeologists uncovered the very reliefs that once decorated the walls of Sennacherib's palace in the ancient city of Nineveh, located in present-day Iraq. These magnificent carvings were discovered in the mid-19th century during excavations of the ancient Assyrian royal palace and were immediately recognized as one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the archaeology of the ancient Near East. What makes these reliefs so remarkable is that they depict the entire siege of Lachish in astonishing detail, almost like individual frames from an ancient war documentary. If you examine the carvings closely, an entire battlefield comes to life. Huge siege machines slowly advance up the assault ramp built by the Assyrian army. Behind them, long lines of soldiers carrying shields, spears, and bows move steadily toward the city walls. On top of the defensive walls, the soldiers of Judah do not flee. They fight back fiercely, shooting arrows and throwing stones down at the approaching enemy forces. Even after nearly 2,700 years, the detailed carvings on the stone still allow us to sense the brutality and intensity of the battle. However, the fate of Lachish was ultimately tragic. The city eventually fell under the overwhelming power of Assyria. The reliefs show victorious Assyrian soldiers leading prisoners away, while other Judean warriors are shown being impaled, a brutal punishment for which the Assyrian Empire was infamous. Another scene depicts the city gates thrown open as frightened residents flee in desperation. And perhaps the most striking image is King Sennacherib, sitting proudly on his throne, watching his victory as groups of prisoners kneel before him in submission. It can be said that the Lachish reliefs are among the rare ancient artworks that portray warfare with such extraordinary detail and realism. What makes this discovery even more convincing is that excavations at Tel Lachish, the ancient mound of Lachish in Israel, uncovered the remains of the Assyrian siege ramp built at the northwest corner of the site. This is the very ramp that the siege machines, shown in the reliefs, would have used to approach the city walls. The remarkable agreement between archaeological evidence and the stone carvings has led many researchers to consider this one of the clearest examples of history being confirmed through both archaeology and biblical accounts. But what makes this story even more fascinating is what does not appear in the reliefs. Have you noticed that? Although Sennacherib had the victory at Lachish carefully carved into the walls of his palace, there is absolutely no scene showing the conquest of Jerusalem. According to the Bible, after Lachish fell, the Assyrian army continued its campaign against Jerusalem. However, the biblical account states that God delivered King Hezekiah and the city, preventing Sennacherib from capturing the capital of Judah. Interestingly, even Sennacherib himself only claimed that he had trapped Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. He never claimed that he had conquered the city. If Jerusalem had truly been defeated, that victory would certainly have been the greatest achievement of Sennacherib's reign and would have been the first thing he would have proudly displayed on his palace walls. Yet what he chose to record was only the victory at Lachish. This unusual silence has become a detail that many scholars find particularly fascinating. Sometimes, history is revealed not only through what survives, but also through the things that were never mentioned. And the Lachish reliefs are a perfect example. After nearly 2,700 years, they remain one of the rare artifacts that allow us to witness almost firsthand a biblical battle brought to life with astonishing historical detail. So, we have just explored together some of the most mysterious biblical archaeological discoveries, where every ancient artifact, every carved inscription, and every remaining trace from the past brings us closer to the stories of thousands of years ago. Although many questions still remain unanswered, it is these very mysteries that make the journey of discovering history more fascinating than ever. Who knows? In the future, new excavations may continue to bring hidden secrets buried beneath the earth back into the light. If you enjoy fascinating archaeological stories, don't forget to join us on our next discoveries by subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell. For now, thank you for watching, goodbye, and we'll see you again soon.